Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Marisol Nichols Podcast. I am beyond excited for my guest today. This organization I have been following, for at least over half the time that I've been working in trafficking. It, to me, answers so many questions about how you have such a high demand for such a dark subject. I don't know how else to say it. You all have heard me talk about that trafficking is supply and demand. And for me, if you have a hard time understanding what would cause someone to want to go and do such inappropriate things with a child, well, my guest today will probably answer all of those questions. I know it did for me. So please welcome to the podcast from the organization Fight the New Drug. Please welcome Parker. Hi, Parker. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Marisol. It's so good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you. I'm so excited. Like literally, I've been since I started this podcast, I'm like, I need to have Fight the New Drug on here. What you guys have and what you've done is so vast and so huge. I can't wait to share it with my audience. But to start out, can you sort of just, from layman's version, tell us about your organization and what it is that you focus on?
Absolutely. That's a great place to start. So Fight the New Drug, we were founded in 2009, and we're an educational nonprofit. And our mission is to raise awareness on the impacts of porn using only science, facts, and personal accounts. So we're non-religious, we're non-legislative. And our goal is essentially to allow individuals to make an educated and informed decision on the topic of pornography by raising awareness on its impacts, like I said. And so essentially what we do is we take available research coming from respected institutions and we make that digestible, attainable, and understandable for people so that they can have access to this information and make educated decisions on the impacts of porn, so they can consider before consuming pornography.
Now, thank you for that. Now, your organization is called Fight the New Drug, which I love. Can you explain to me what that means in terms of your organization focuses on the effects of pornography, research-based, science-based data, which we'll get into, but why the title Fight the New Drug?
Yeah, it's a great question. It kind of throws people for a loop a little bit. But when we were starting things, I wasn't around then, but when they were starting things, they wanted people to really understand what the research was showing, that pornography fits into the addiction framework model, that it impacts people in similar ways to other addictions, and that it really can affect the individual, the consumer, their relationships or connections with the people around them, and that it has broader impacts on our society and our world as a whole. And so we really wanted to use that strong language to get that point across.
So it's comparing pornography to an actual addiction, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And we've known for a long time that there are things that aren't substances that are addictive, right? Like gambling addiction has been in the DSM for quite some time. And now, although pornography is not still in the DSM, there are compulsive sexual behaviors is listed in the DSM, which many people would label pornography usage under.
People understand what the DSM is and what he's talking about. The DSM is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual that essentially the American Psychiatric Association uses to basically come up with a name or label for any disorders or whatever. So you can look in it's a published book. You can look in it. The diseases or disorders get voted in every year, but in there is things like ADHD, ADD, mathematics disorder, all of these other things in there. And so when he says the DSM, he is talking about that a gambling addiction has been recognized by the APA in that book as an addiction, but pornography addiction is still hasn't made it in there. Is that correct?
Yeah. You said that perfectly. I couldn't have said it better myself. But yeah, compulsive sexual behaviors are listed in the DSM, and there is research showing that pornography fits in the addiction framework. There's more and more research coming out all the time about pornography's impacts.
Can you talk about some of that? Can you sort of talk about how the research that you guys have found, how pornography fits into an addictive framework?
One of the things that's probably the easiest thing, if this is new information to somebody, to focus on is the connection between the prefrontal cortex and the reward system. And
the
research, yes, exactly.
I don't want my audience
the
to
prefrontal cortex is kind of like the decision making area of the brain. It helps us make healthy decisions, and the reward system is kind of like the base thing that helps us be alive and find things that make us happy, right?
Sure.
Sleeping, eating, reproducing, things like that.
Right.
So the research shows that pornography actually weakens the connection between the prefrontal cortex and the reward system. And that's kind of the first step into someone developing a compulsive behavior or an addiction to something, because the reward system is the gas pedal if the brain was a car, and the prefrontal cortex are the brakes meant to keep that reward system in check. And so that pornography, that habit or compulsive behavior or addiction with pornography, depending on where someone's at, pornography can be habit forming. It can become an escalating behavior, and it can impact people's mental health. It can be addictive, all of those things.
It so can. And, I've done the deep dive onto your website. And if anyone wants to know more, please go to fightthenewdrug.org. It's a wealth of information, and all the studies that Parker is mentioning are on there. So you can click and read it for yourself. This isn't an opinion based. There are opinions, of course, but the science is science. So it is very interesting what your organization points out. And which brings me to, why in the world are we talking about pornography on my podcast? And I'll explain, now I want to explain this, which is, can you explain the connection, or at least one of the many connections, between pornography and trafficking? Let's start from the supply demand side. Let's just start there.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe if I could just give a little reminder of what I said at the beginning. Fight the Drug, we're trying to educate on how porn impacts individuals, relationships, and society. So we kind of briefly dove into some of the stuff under how porn impacts individuals, talking about how it can be addictive, habit forming, things like that. And now we're kind of transitioning to talking about how it impacts our society and our world, relating pornography and its connection to sexual exploitation and sex trafficking. So to understand porn's connection to sex trafficking, I think it's important that we talk about the legal definition of sex trafficking. Many people, when they think of sex trafficking, they think of what they see in the movies, and you're great at kind of differentiating this in the content that you put out. They think of someone being kidnapped or held somewhere or forced into commercial sexual exploitation, a lot of times in another country or something like that. And as you have said yourself in your maker's speech recently, you said, while that does happen, that's not the whole of sex trafficking. And so I think talking about the legal definition helps people to kind of broaden the horizon of what sex trafficking is fully. And so the legal definition of sex trafficking was defined by the TVPA, the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, which was passed in the year 2000. And it was a huge bipartisan effort. And it defined sex trafficking. And it defined sex trafficking as a commercial sex act that involves force, fraud, or coercion, or where there's someone under the age of 18. So a commercial sex act, meaning money or something else of value is exchanged for sex. Under 18 being a minor. So if money or something else of value is exchanged for sex and there's a minor involved, it's sex trafficking by legal definition.
Or if there's fraud, force, and coercion on the other side, then it falls into that category of sex trafficking. Thank you for that.
Yes. So, or if they're an adult and there's force, fraud, or coercion involved in a commercial sex act where money or something else of value is exchanged for sex, then that is sex trafficking. So kind of clarifying that, what is force, right? Force can be holding someone against their will, or physically overpowering them, drugging them, right? Things we often see in media. Fraud can be tricked, and coercion is being manipulated, threatened, or intimidated into something that you would not otherwise participate in. The issue starts to become more clear, as you can see, when we talk about the legal definition, because these are common practices in the porn production industry: force, fraud, and coercion. This means if someone has pay withheld, or if they're told if you don't do this, you won't be paid in full, or if they are forced to sign a contract without reading it, or if the terms of that contract are changed, or if someone's personal documents are withheld from them, if they're blackmailed, if they're coerced in any way, which these are all common practices in the pornography production industry. You can read more about this on our blog. You can see true story videos about it on our website from people who are former porn performers. And you can see pretty quickly how sex trafficking and pornography are what we at Fight the Drug would say inseparably connected.
That is absolutely, absolutely true. And I think for the audience, for some people, this might be the first time that they're hearing that these quote unquote performers are not there voluntarily, that they're not there having a good time. And that is also what I love about your website, is because you give these sort of past people who have been able to escape that life or escape their traffickers a voice, and they explain what they went through personally and how they were forced into that industry. Can you give an example? Because I know to me and you, it's sort of like, well, yeah, everyone knows, but for the audience, they don't actually understand that. And you have it all over your website, but for the people listening, can you give me like one or two examples of like what you mean by being coerced, held against their will, not allowed, 5 men and a naked girl? Like, there's lots of examples on how you could be forced, but for the layperson listening to this for the first time, let's sort of maybe walk them through it.
No, absolutely. And maybe before we go into that, even taking a step back, I think it's important to say that one of our goals at Fight the New Drug is to avoid shame. If you're someone listening to this and you're hearing for the first time that there is sexual exploitation and sex trafficking occurring within the production of pornography, I want you to know that I'm not here to shame anyone or make anyone feel bad. That's not my goal. That doesn't help anyone to change their behaviors or to want to make healthier decisions. Our goal is simply to bring this to people's attention so that they can make healthier, more informed decisions and lead happier lives. Because many people today were exposed to pornography at such a young age that they've never even considered that porn may be harmful. In the same way that many people put gasoline in their car and they have no idea how it works, or they turn on a light switch and they have no idea where that electricity comes from, how it's produced, how the wiring in their home works to actually make light out of a bulb, right? Like many of us don't think about these things, but especially for something like pornography, where for much of your life, it may have been a taboo subject. You were exposed to it accidentally at a really young age. It seemed culturally acceptable to not talk about or to consume, but we don't talk about it. And that can really lead to the issue we have today, where there's many people who consume porn, have never considered that it might be harmful. And then you hear something like this for the first time and you're like, oh my goodness, you're saying that consuming pornography fuels sexual exploitation. So I want to give those people some space to realize we're not here to shame you or make you feel bad, but we are here to help educate and raise awareness on this issue. Now, as far as the other part of your question, talking about some examples of this.
Like, how does this occur?
Yeah, there are story after story on our website or on the internet generally of people being sexually exploited in the production of pornography. One example of that, a recent news story, a young woman's partner took explicit photos and videos of her without her knowledge, posted them on a porn site. And then when this partner realized that he could make money from that content, he forced her and threatened her into producing more content. He was actually charged with sex trafficking. Other examples would be Girls Do Porn. This was a widely applauded, and I would even say within the porn production industry, like respected organization that created pornography. Right. And their entire profit model was or their entire advertising model was that their brand was young, naive girls who didn't know any better getting into porn for the first time. And the problem with that is that was actually also the truth. They were proved to have been seeking out mostly women, young women, who were fitness models, influencers, yoga models, think of things like that. They would tell them that they were going to participate in fitness photo shoots, model yoga clothing, have modeling opportunities for swimsuits, things like that. They would fly them out to California, and instead, when they arrived on set, they would be forced to sign a contract. They would be held against their will while they were drugged, raped, and forced into producing pornography. They were often held for days or full nights while being repeatedly raped for hours on camera with hours and hours of footage. And then in the after this happens, there's hours and hours of content to edit through and sift through in order to make it look like this content was consensual, that those people wanted to be there. When in reality, if they were in pain or if they were like, I don't want to do this, all of that was edited out. They were told that if you don't do this, we'll send these photos we already took of you to your family. We'll tell them that no one will ever believe you, right? All of these things that we've been talking about that define sex trafficking. And actually the executives of this company were on the top the FBI's top 10 most wanted list until recently. They were found in New Zealand, the head of the company, and they've been charged with crimes of sex trafficking, everyone from the person filming the content to the performers, the performers that worked for the company that were seeking out these people and sexually abusing them. And then, of course, the executives of the company as well.
First of all, I love that they were caught. With Backpage or other things, these things can go on for decades until it's finally
and I do want to be
stopped.
clear. I think Girls Do Porn started in the early 2010s. So this took a long time. Some of these survivors, it was over a decade before they found justice, if I'm remembering correctly.
That sounds about right.
Some form of justice, I should say.
And so my, just spell that out in the easiest way. Imagine being raped, someone videoing it, and then that being shared all over the world, and someone's getting rich off of it. Many people getting rich off of it. And
absolutely.
It's unthinkable. And the fact that you said how you started this out was that Girls Do Porn was respected in this industry for what they did. It's nauseating.
Yeah, unfortunately, because of lack of accountability within the porn production industry and existing laws not being enforced, it's a complex issue. And so it is impossible for someone to know if the content that they are consuming was produced in a way that was consensual. It's impossible to know if the countless porn videos on these sites contain child sexual exploitation material, when the most sought after terms are young girl, teen, right? Stepbrother, stepsister. Like when these are the most popular searched categories of pornography as published by Pornhub themselves, it's impossible to know that the content that someone is consuming was in any way consensually made. It's impossible to know when there's literally millions of videos that were taken down from Pornhub a few years ago when Visa and MasterCard threatened to stop processing payments because they're, when anyone can upload a video on their phone to a website, and the website functions much like YouTube, and you can just post anything except with much less moderation, then there's going to be problems, right? It's going to be too easy for child sexual exploitation material, revenge porn, where a former partner is posting content without your knowledge or consent that you sent them a long time ago as a way to get revenge for breaking up with them, or to blackmail you, or to embarrass you, or make you lose your job. Whatever the many issues that we discuss at Fight the New Drug, all of these types of content have been active on the most popular porn sites, and that is a problem,
to say the least. I had, I'm sure you're familiar with Layla Micklethwait.
Yeah. Okay. I listened to her interview on your show.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. She was on, she's doing such great work. And the work continues. And for the audience who hasn't listened to it, what we're talking about are multiple lawsuits now against Pornhub that judges are now finally allowing to go through, of victims of child sexual abuse, victims of rape, and Pornhub making a fortune. And this is what we're talking about, which is part of the problem. And the other side of the coin is there's no, you mentioned, what's the average age that a child comes across
is exposed to pornography?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, recent quality research shows that the average age that the majority of kids are exposed to pornography by the time they're between 11 and 13. So by the time a kid is between the ages of 11 and 13, the majority of kids have already seen pornography by that age. And that research also shows that some of those kids are exposed as young as 7 years old.
I agree. Just from having a daughter and she's on the internet, she gets bombarded with stuff that is insanely inappropriate. Like when you say have seen it, I don't think I'm assuming the majority of that statistic aren't kids that are like, let me go find porn. It comes to them.
Not. Yeah, I can assure you. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I saw another shocking statistic the other day that 1 in 8 women within 1 week of creating a social media account receive a sexual solicitation online. So someone sending them an inappropriate photo, someone soliciting them for sex, those kinds of things. Yeah. So this is a real problem. And that's one of the issues that we talk about. We don't necessarily have to dive in this today, but that it creates a culture of objectification. When we have a world where anyone at any moment has access to more content in their pocket on a cellular device than all of human history had combined as far as pornography, that is a recipe for creating a culture of sexual objectification.
Parker, I think one of the biggest things that breaks my heart, that as you talked about the effects of pornography on society and also on just women and girls in general, is this normalization of abuse and objectification. And it almost teaches young girls that this is how sex is supposed to be. And so, we're out of time for this episode, but I'd like to tell my audience, please tune in for part 2, where we're going to get into this very subject of how this industry is affecting young women and young boys, their outlook of what a healthy not only sexual relationship, but what a healthy relationship is. So thank you for coming on, and tune in, everyone, for part 2. Thank you for listening to the Marisol Nichols Podcast, and please do not forget to click like and subscribe. And a big shout out to WD Hahn for our theme song, Something's Gotta Change. See you next time.